I had spent years delving into the depths of the human psyche, helping others confront their inner demons and fears. But over the past few weeks, I had started to question my own sanity. I had just recently moved to a new town after a bad experience with a former patient last year. David, a manic bipolar, had developed an obsession and began stalking me. When he made threats to my life, I filed charges and he was institutionalized. Even though I knew I was safe, I still couldn't feel comfortable in my hometown, knowing that he would be released. So I set out to start a new practice here. Everything seemed all right for a while, but over the past few weeks, things had changed. It started with the phone calls. At first, I thought it was just a wrong number when my phone went off at 2 in the morning and the person hung up immediately. But then it happened again the next night, and the next night after that, and then the next. Then late in the evenings when leaving work, I would swear that I could hear footsteps behind me in the empty parking garage, and constantly had the feeling I was being watched. I told myself that it was just trauma from the stalking last year playing tricks on my mind. David was safely locked away. He couldn't get me. I was exhausted. It had been a long day at the clinic, and now all I wanted to do was go home, make some dinner, and relax for the night. As I reached my car and unlocked the door, I heard footsteps behind me. I had worked late that night. It was nearly 11 o'clock, and there were almost no other cars in the parking lot. My senses were on high alert, and I hurried to my car. As I approached my car, suddenly a man stepped out of the shadows, blocking my way. My stomach dropped as he came into view. David had found me. He slowly approached me, reaching into his pocket to grab something. I didn't want to give him the chance to pull out whatever it was. I knew I had to act fast. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Just try to calm down for a second. Let's just talk. Nobody needs to get hurt." David laughed coldly. "You think you can psychoanalyze me, Doc? You're not the one in control here." I had to stay calm, to keep him engaged in conversation. "I'm not trying to control you, David. I just want to understand why you're doing this. What do you hope to achieve?" David drew a blade from his pocket. His glare was haunting. "It's too late, Doc," he snarled. "It didn't have to come to this." He rushed towards me. I tried to run, but it was no use. Soon he was on top of me with his hand over my mouth. He held his finger to his lips, motioning for me to stay quiet. Slowly, he let me up, holding the knife to me, and led me to the car. When we got inside, he instructed me to drive, and that he would tell me where to go. I had to keep my cool if I was going to survive this. I tried to keep him talking. I searched my mind for what I knew about him. I had to appeal to his humanity. "So, David, where are we going?" He didn't give me a direct answer. His words were jumbled and hard to follow, but he got the point across that he believed I had been leading him on, and how I would have no choice but to now pay attention to him. This could be my opening. "I understand," I said. "It must be very hard to be alone the way you've been. I remember when you told me about your mother." He became visibly uncomfortable, shifting around in the passenger seat. "She used to lock you in the closet when you were just a little boy, isn't that right?" This made him burst out in anger, and he told me not to mention his mother. I did my best to calm him. I told him that what happened to him wasn't his fault. His emotions flew into a whirlwind. He screamed in anger and sobbed while muttering for forgiveness from his long-dead mother. I could see his grip on reality was faltering. Through his ranting, he was able to give me instructions on where he wanted us to go. We found ourselves driving down an old dirt road leading into the woods. This was not good. I knew I didn't have much time if I wanted to make it out of this situation alive. Eventually, the road led to a run-down shack, long abandoned. I had to hide just how frightened I was. As he led me into the old shack, I heard muffled screams coming from inside. Fearing the worst, I rushed inside to find a young woman tied up and lying on the dirty floor. Oh my God. David, what have you done? He continued to rave at me, rambling about how we would all be sorry for what we'd done to him. There was no more time to fool around. I had to reach him before it was too late. I assured him that we were both on his side and that we weren't trying to hurt him. He didn't seem to believe me. I had to take a different approach. I told him that everything would be all right if he just let us go now. I told him that I wouldn't turn him into the police, because if they locked him up, we couldn't be together. That's what finally caught his attention. I had to lie in order to save our lives. I confessed that I found all his attention flattering, that I had tried to deny it, but I couldn't anymore. He smiled widely as he bought into my ruse. I held out my arms for an embrace. He dropped the knife and ran from me, hugging me tight. Trying to remain inconspicuous, I kicked the knife at the woman tied on the floor. She grabbed the knife and quickly went to work, using it to saw at the ropes binding her wrists. To not give her away, I told David that I wanted to be alone with him. We made our way to another room as the captured woman worked at freeing herself. I had to keep him busy. I kept professing my love, telling him of the life we would build together. Finally, the woman slowly crept into the room and plunged the knife deep into David's back. We were safe, but it was no victory. It was my life's work to help the mentally ill, to offer them peace. Now I will forever be haunted by the patient I could not save.
It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I and my friends left our dorm for a weekend road trip. Josh had told us of an old cabin where he and his family would spend their summers when he was a kid. It had been a particularly trying semester, and a weekend away at the lake sounded like just what I needed. As we drove deeper into the countryside, the landscape shifted from rolling hills to dense forests. The road seemed to stretch endlessly before us, winding through towering trees that obscured the sun. It was during one of our heated debates over the choice of music that we missed a turn. By the time we realized our mistake, we found ourselves entering a strange old town buried deep in the woods. There were no road signs, no gas stations, nothing to indicate where we were. It was as if we had stumbled into a forgotten corner of the world. The town appeared out of nowhere, like a mirage on the horizon. A cluster of dilapidated buildings stood against the backdrop of the forest, their windows shattered and their facades covered in ivy. It was a ghost town, a relic of the past that time had forgotten. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to explore. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. The buildings seemed frozen in time, as if the town had been abandoned in a hurry. As we delved deeper into the heart of the town, we stumbled upon an old courthouse. Its imposing structure loomed over us, and we couldn't resist the temptation to enter. The doors creaked open with an eerie groan, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, we found a dusty courtroom frozen in time. The wooden pews were empty, and the judge's bench lay abandoned. But what caught our attention most was a series of old, tattered newspapers scattered across the floor. The headlines were grim, telling the story of a tragic event that had befallen the town decades ago. A raging fire had consumed the courthouse and claimed the lives of many. A devastating event that had left the town scarred. As we read through the articles, a sense of unease settled over us. It was as if the very walls of the courthouse held the memories of that fateful night, and the tragic event had left an indelible mark on the town. We left the courthouse and continued our exploration of the town, but it soon became apparent that something was amiss. No matter where we turned, we found ourselves back at the courthouse, as if the town itself was guiding us back to that fateful night. As night fell, we decided to find shelter in one of the abandoned buildings. We chose a decrepit inn with dusty, cobweb-covered furniture. As we settled in, we heard a faint, haunting melody, a mournful tune that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The melody drew us deeper into the inn, leading us to a hidden room on the second floor. Inside, we found a collection of old photographs, each depicting a different era in the town's history. But what struck us most were the images of a young woman, her face etched with sorrow. Suddenly, a voice came out of nowhere. "You must leave this place. You do not belong here." The woman's words seemed to resonate with a sense of urgency, and we knew we had to heed her warning. We left the inn and made our way back to the center of town. We found the courthouse, now set ablaze with the deafening sounds of screams emanating from inside. It was then that we realized the truth. The town was trapped in a never-ending cycle, cursed to repeat the same tragic event over and over again. The fire that had claimed the lives of so many had left an indelible mark on the town, a curse that bound it to relive that night for all eternity. Desperation set in as we tried to find a way out, but the town seemed determined to keep us within its grasp. The same haunting melody that had drawn us into the inn now echoed through the streets, a mournful dirge that seemed to seep into our very souls. As we stood in the blazing glow of the fire, we began to hear a pounding on the front door. An idea sprang to my mind, and I ran to the door and kicked as hard as I could. The door burst in, and a bowl of fire plumed out, igniting the sleeve of my jacket. I hit the ground to put out the fire, and when I looked up, that's when I saw them. Marching out of the courthouse came a parade of people, charred and blistered. They looked at me sullenly as they marched off into the darkness. As the flames consumed the old building, the sounds of the screaming ceased, and the building finally collapsed. It was as if the spirits of the past were finally released, their suffering brought to an end. With the courthouse in ruins, the town began to change. The darkness that had shrouded it lifted, and we found ourselves standing amid a vibrant, living town. The buildings were no longer abandoned, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and life. We left the town behind, our hearts heavy with the weight of the curse that had bound it for so long. It was a place that time had forgotten, a town trapped in a never-ending nightmare. But we had broken the cycle, freed the spirits of the past, and brought peace to a place that had known only sorrow. As we drove away from the town, we couldn't help but wonder about the woman from the photographs, the one who had warned us to leave. We hoped that she, too, had found her peace, her spirit finally free from the curse that had held her captive for so long.
It was a cold, gray morning when we arrived at the old farmhouse. The place had been in the family for generations, a relic of a bygone era. As we stepped out of the car, my mind was filled with the memories of the endless summers I had spent here as a girl. And I couldn't wait to share those experiences now with my own children. My husband, James, and our 2 children, Lucy and Ben, were excited about the prospect of country living. They had dreams of running through fields and picking apples from the orchard. But looking around, I noticed that the place was a bit different than the pictures I had in my memories. The farmhouse was weathered, its wooden siding faded and cracked. The front porch sagged under the weight of years, and the windows were murky, as if hiding secrets from the past. But it was the overgrown garden that gave me the most pause. The weeds seemed to have taken on a life of their own, twisting and crawling like serpents. As we settled in, strange things began to happen. At night, we would hear whispers, faint and distant, as if carried on the wind. I told myself it was just the creaking of old wood, the sighing of an aging house. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing night. One evening, as James and I lay in bed, we heard a voice, unmistakable and chilling. "Help us," it pleaded, a desperate cry from beyond the veil of the living. I shook James to see if he was awake. "Did you hear that?" He nodded with a worried look on his face. We exchanged a silent, terrified look, our thoughts mirroring each other. Something was not right in this house. The next day, we decided to investigate the history of the farmhouse. We visited the local library and combed through old records, uncovering a disturbing tale. Before it was bought by my grandparents, the farmhouse had once belonged to a family who had met a tragic end. There was an accident with a piece of farming equipment that claimed the lives of the two young children. The parents, unable to live with the grief, ended their own lives shortly afterward. Determined to uncover the truth, we began to research the history of the farmhouse in earnest. As we delved into the articles, we discovered that this may have been no accident, but rather the result of a long-standing feud between the farmhouse's former occupants and a neighboring family. There were rumors that they had sabotaged the equipment, which led to the children's deaths. There was a brief police investigation, but nothing could be proved, and therefore no charges could be filed. As we delved deeper into our investigation, the voices at night grew louder, their words more urgent. "Set us free," they implored, their cries filled with sorrow and rage. We decided to hold a séance, hoping to make contact with the spirits and learn more about what had happened. We gathered in the dimly lit living room, the air heavy with anticipation. James held a worn, antique Ouija board, while I lit a single candle. We placed our hands on the planchette and began to ask questions. At first, there was only silence. But then, with a sudden force, the planchette began to move. It spelled out names and dates, revealing the tragic history of the farmhouse. The spirits told us of their suffering, of the pain and anger that bound them to the earthly realm. They begged us to seek justice for them, to uncover the truth and bring their murderers to account. It was a solemn promise we made that night, a pact with the restless souls that haunted our home. Our investigation led us to the descendants of the neighboring family, a reclusive and secretive bunch. As we delved deeper into their history, we uncovered a web of deception and betrayal that stretched back generations. It seemed that the feud had never truly ended, that the spirits of the farmhouse were not the only ones seeking justice. We confronted the descendants, revealing the dark secrets of their ancestors. They denied any involvement, but the guilt in their eyes was unmistakable. It was clear that they knew more than they were letting on, that they were hiding a truth they had been raised to keep hidden. With the evidence we had gathered, we contacted the authorities and demanded a full investigation. The descendants of the neighboring family were questioned, their lies unraveling under the scrutiny of the law. In the end, they confessed to their ancestors' crimes, and justice was finally served. As the guilty were led away in handcuffs, a sense of relief washed over us. The whispers in the night had ceased, and the farmhouse felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The spirits had found their peace, their restless souls finally able to move on. We decided to stay in the farmhouse, to honor the memory of the family who had lived there before us. It was no longer a place of fear and darkness, but a home filled with the warmth and laughter of our own family. But as the years passed, I couldn't help but wonder about the nature of the spirits that had haunted us. Were they truly seeking justice, or had they simply been trapped by their own anger and despair? The farmhouse had been a place of suffering, a battleground for a feud that had spanned generations. I couldn't help but wonder if the spirits had finally found the peace they sought, or if they were doomed to wander the earth for all eternity, their voices forever echoing in the night. It was a question that haunted my thoughts, a reminder that the line between the living and the dead was not always clear, and that the past had a way of reaching out to touch the present, even in the most unexpected of ways.